A big hello to Matt Suess. And so, Matt, you've got some great experience with Luminar. You've used it, I think, since the very beginning, and you tend to use it as a plug-in to your workflow. I know that, like a lot of working photographers, you have many different tools that you need to use to get your job done. So, how does Luminar work with you as a plugin? Is it giving you the ability to integrate this into your workflow and different tools?
Yeah, absolutely. The advantage of using it in a plugin for me is that we all have our favorite tools to do raw processing, and I like Lightroom, especially now with the Lightroom Mobile I've been playing around with, and also Capture One Pro, and Luminar does great raw processing too. But my workflow has evolved over the years, and I love using some of these other tools to then get my photo in sort of like a round one first state, and then bring it into Luminar to do the fine tuning, the stylizing that I like to do. So I'm not trying to finish my photo inside of Lightroom or Capture One Pro or any of these other ones, but get it good enough so that then I can send it to Luminar as a plugin to then again do that fine tuning, get that special stylizing that's a key to my photos.
So you're doing things in different stages, and that's totally fine.
Mhm.
Some folks want to have a multi-tool, and they want to have everything in one tool, and Luminar tries to provide you a well-rounded tool set. But some of you heard Alex, our CEO, earlier. Folks at Skylum, we believe that Luminar should be useful to everyone. And so there's zero issue if you want to use it. You could target it as an external editor for Capture One. You can use it as a plugin for Lightroom. This is great. Even if you're using the new Lightroom, which doesn't support plugins, you can kick your image from that Lightroom into Photoshop, apply it as a filter, and send it back. So however it works for you, the goal here is that it saves you time. So Matt, you've had a chance to use this new version, and I got to tell you, I love your sky pack. So I'm assuming that you like the sky replacement feature, since you made 400 skies for it. But what are some of your other favorite features, and how do you like to use Luminar? And then we'll take a look at your tutorial here.
Yeah. Going to the Sky Pack. Yeah, that 400 photos didn't come overnight. I mean, that's been a 10-year process in the making. In the
I didn't
past,
say it
I've
was easy. I just
oh
appreciate you
boy.
doing it. If I tried to get those 400 photos in Washington D.C., I think I would have to go back in time a couple hundred years. So it's excellent.
Yeah, and I am a big fan of the Sky replacement, and for a first version, I mean, it's super fantastic. And over the years, I don't do a ton of Sky replacement on my own personal photographs, but I know a lot of photographers love doing it, and they don't have the time to spend that I do. I live 4 hours away from the Teton, so I can go down there anytime I want and get any type of sky I want in the foreground. But a lot of people don't have that advantage and luxury, and so I've been teaching sky replacement for a number of years with different software packages, and now with Luminar 4, and it just makes it so much easier and so much more accurate and better results right off the bat too. With a couple caveats, you got to know, blend that light, make sure you're picking the right clouds for the right scene. But yeah, I've been really excited about that inside the new Luminar. Just being able to use it as a plugin, and I'm going to talk about that in the video that I have recorded. Being able to use it as a smart object so that I can go ahead and do some work in Photoshop in Luminar and save it as a smart object, and then also be able to then go back in the future and readjust any of those sliders that I made, and even bring it onto another computer. It's kind of like the new way of saving a .lmnr file, which you can't do anymore. You can now save it as a layered PSD file inside of Photoshop with the smart object and still be able to have that re-editability in the future.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of that. I've been using Luminar as a plugin to Photoshop as part of my own workflow for a long time. Again, folks, however you want to use it, it's up to you. We just hope that you get value from it and that you like it. Matt, you brought up a good point, though, and I know we're going to take a look at your tutorial here in 1 second, but I want to reemphasize this. You said, hey, if you're going to use something like sky replacement or really any tool, think it through. Make sure that you're using something that makes sense. Don't put a Milky Way sky over Manhattan because you'd never see it there. Don't take, clouds from a beach and put them in the desert because it may not look like it matches. You got to pick something that's a good fit here. Do you have any other practical advice before we take a look at your tutorial here?
Yeah, and that's all good advice too, and it also really depends on the user intent too. So, if you are looking to portray reality, then yeah, definitely you want to make sure that that sky, matches up with your foreground. If you're really looking to push things a lot, then putting a sky in Manhattan, a Milky Way sky that you wouldn't normally be able to see, you know you can actually do that. And I've seen some photographers that do that where they take photos in certain areas that you just will never be able to see the sky. And they, line it up perfectly so they know exactly where that Milky Way is going to be above that skyscraper. And then they'll superimpose that in there and be like, hey, imagine if you could see the Milky Way above New York City. This is what it would look like. And, being able to do that inside of Luminar 4, you could do that easily with the sky replacement.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Matt, how about we take a look at your tutorial? Let me go ahead and cue it up. And what are we going to see here?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Photoshop and also inside of Lightroom, and just some workflows that I use inside of that.
All right, let's have a look, and then Matt will tackle some of your questions afterwards. So stand by, everyone, as we cue this up.
Hi guys, my name is Matt Suess, and I'm a fine art landscape photographer, educator, and publisher based in Bozeman, Montana. And I want to thank Richard Harrington and Skylum for allowing me to come here and be part of this awesome launch party for Luminar 4, which comes out today. Today I am going to be talking about using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Photoshop and inside of Lightroom. So let's go ahead and get started right away. First things first, when you want to use this as a plugin inside of Luminar, you want to make sure that the plugin is installed correctly. So open up Luminar 4 as a standalone program, and if you're on the Mac, go up here into the Luminar 4 menu and click on Install Plugins. Now if you're on a PC, that should be under the File menu. So let's go ahead and take a look at Install Plugins. When I do that, Luminar is going to check and see where it has been installed as a plugin. If it wasn't installed in Photoshop or Lightroom, you can click here and there'll be an Install button. You can also install it in Photoshop Elements or Apple Aperture. I don't have either one of those on my computer, so that's why these install buttons are grayed out. So now that I know that this plugin is installed correctly in both Photoshop and Lightroom, let's go ahead and start with Photoshop first. Now, in Photoshop, here we are. I already have a photo loaded up here. This photo was a RAW file originally from my Olympus camera, and I processed it already inside of Lightroom, and now I opened it up as a TIFF file. I saved it out of Lightroom as a 16-bit TIFF file and opened it up here inside of Photoshop. And when I'm using Luminar as a plugin, my goal is to really fine-tune the image. So I'll do all of my main processing in Lightroom or Capture One Pro, and then I'll bring it into Photoshop and use Luminar as a plugin to add those fine-tune adjustments to it, just to make that image just pop just a little bit more. Now there's a couple cool ways of using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Photoshop, and one is to use it as a smart object. Now using this as a smart object, this is going to allow you to go ahead and make your adjustments inside of Luminar, and then when it comes back into Photoshop, if you wanted to readjust one of those sliders, you can go back in, because it's a smart object, you can go back into Luminar 4 and redo some of those adjustments that you made. It's a really powerful tool. So let me show you how to go about that. Now you can make a smart object on your base layer, but I prefer to work on another layer. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layer, and on the Mac I'm going to do Command J. That's going to duplicate my layer over here. On the PC it would be Control J, or you can go up here under Layer and click on Duplicate Layer. Now that I have my layer duplicated, I'm going to go under Layer, Smart Objects, and Convert to Smart Object. Once that converts to a smart object, we'll see a little icon over here that indicates that this is a smart object, and we can see that in the lower corner of the thumbnail. Now let's go ahead and launch Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Photoshop. I'll go under Filter, Skylum Software, Luminar 4, and launch it. Okay, now here we are inside of Luminar 4 running as a plugin inside of Photoshop. I know it's running as a plugin because in the upper left-hand corner here, I have options to cancel and apply. This means that you're running it as a plugin inside of another program. I also know that it's running as a plugin because the library is disabled up on top here. You do not have access to the library inside of Luminar 4 when it's running as a plugin, but you have access to all the other tools inside of Luminar. I can even click on the info and find info about my camera. So let's go ahead and edit this photo. You can see down below here that I have access to all my Luminar looks inside here running as a plugin, or I can go ahead over here on the right hand side and start making manual adjustments. I've already made some adjustments to this and saved it as a look before, so let's go ahead and dial that up and see what I did. What I ended up doing here was using the light tool and opened up my shadows just a little bit. We can see I used a little bit of AI Enhance, just a tiny bit of the AI accent. Now moving on down to the AI structure, I actually removed just a little bit of structure from the photo. Didn't want to have it be too sharp on this image. And over here too, I also added a vignette. We can turn that off and on to see the effects of the vignette. What's great is that when you do use one of your looks or one of the looks supplied by someone else, you do get to see which tools were used because they're a little bit brighter on the right-hand side than the other ones. We can go through the other ones in the creative category. I didn't use anything there, nothing in the portrait, and nothing in the professional category. We can take a look at the before and after. And you can see here, this is one of the strengths that I love about Luminar, is that you can just come in here really quickly and make just a couple adjustments and get a really big difference here. I mean, this is just a couple of slider adjustments that really fine tune this image and give it the pop that I need. This image was photographed last week out in Missouri on a commercial shoot that I was doing, and I got a feeling that the clients are going to really enjoy this photo, especially now that I've brightened up the middle here and have a real nice warm feel to it. Let me go ahead and click on apply. This is now going to send this photo back into Photoshop, and I'll show you how the smart objects really come into play. Okay, on the right hand side in my layers panel, we can see that I have another category down here called smart filters, and I also have Luminar 4. Now, I talked about earlier how I can go back into Luminar 4 and make some adjustments. Let's say I needed to maybe soften that vignette a little bit. Well, because it's saved as a smart object, I have that option to do that now. So all I have to do is double click on Luminar 4 in my layers panel, and it's going to open it back up into Luminar 4 with all those adjustments that I had. Okay, here we are back in Luminar 4. Let me go down to the vignette and let me just not make that as intense. So I'll back off on the amount slider and click on apply. It's going to send it back to Photoshop again with the new adjustments that I just made to it. So this is one of the advantages of using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Photoshop, especially when you're using it as a smart object. If I did not make this a smart object, the only way I would have been able to go back and do any changes, I would have had to go back into my history to go back to right just before I brought it into Luminar 4 and then start from scratch again. I wouldn't have all those adjustments made, especially if I wasn't starting from a look already. Now, what I would end up doing is saving this file as a PSD file. If I save it with all my layers intact, that means that the next time I open this file, I could even open it up on a different computer. All these adjustments are in that file. I can go in, even on a different computer, double click on that Luminar 4 in the layers panel and reopen it and be able to re-edit any adjustments that I made inside of Luminar 4. One other advantage you have to using this as a plugin inside of Photoshop is that you can take advantage of actions. Let me go ahead and we'll just go back down to where I duplicated this layer in my history panel. I'm going to go ahead and make a new action. So on my actions, I'm going to go out of button mode and I'm going to click down here and click on new action, and I'll just call this Luminar 4 lights. And I'm going to keep it in a set that I already have called matte, and I'm going to click on record. Now what I'm going to do here is go ahead and go layer, smart objects, convert to smart object. With these actions are you're able to pre-record certain steps in your photo to then at the touch of a button have that then applied to your photo in the future. So now that I've converted this to a smart object, let's go ahead and go filter, Luminar 4, let's bring that back up. And now that we're back in Luminar 4, I'm just going to click on this preset that I had again. This was the preset that I used earlier, and I'm going to click on apply. This will now send it back to Photoshop again. Okay, back in Photoshop, under my actions, I'm going to click on stop, and now I've recorded this action, and we can see this action here called Luminar Lights. It's going to convert to Smart Object, and then it's going to run Luminar 4, and it's going to apply that preset that I just specified. Let's see this in action. So let me go into button mode. Let me go back into my history, right where I duplicated that layer. You could even go one back where it was open and then start your recording on your action to have it do a duplicate layer right off the bat. But I started my action right when I did the layer via copy. And let's go ahead here and click on actions, and let's find that action that I just recorded and scroll down here. Here it is, Luminar 4 lights. Let me click on that and we can watch what happens. And this is just going to play out automatically, hands off. I don't have to do anything right now. It just made a smart copy, a smart object of my layer, and now it's bringing it into Luminar, and it's going to apply that look that I gave it. Okay, now here's where the automation on the actions actually stop. You have to hit apply. But after I hit apply, it's now going to bring it back into Photoshop. So it did all that other stuff for me prior to automatically. Just got to hit apply once it's in Luminar 4, and then it'll apply it and bring it back into Photoshop, and here we are. So to summarize, two key important values of working with Luminar 4 inside of Photoshop: using it as a smart object so you can go back in and re-edit the sliders that you made, the adjustments that you made inside of Luminar 4, and also using it as an action to sort of speed up your workflow and sort of daisy chain a couple steps that you would do inside of Photoshop on typical photos. Next, we're going to take a look at using this as a plugin inside of Lightroom. Okay, let's take a look at using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Lightroom. First things first, let's go up under Preferences inside of Lightroom and click on External Editing. On the Additional External Editor, select Luminar 4, and then set the preferences here to what type of file types that you normally use. I usually use a TIFF file with Adobe RGB color space 16-bit with a resolution of 240, and then also check whether you want to have it stacked with your original. This is all settings that when it goes to the plugin, it's going to set it as a certain file type when it comes back into Lightroom. Once you have those preferences all set, we'll go here and take a look. Now, I've already done a little bit of editing on this photo. I've opened up some shadows and some highlights and did a little bit of vibrance and saturation here. What I'm going to do to this photo is that I want to replace the sky real quick. I obviously can't do that inside of Lightroom. There's no layers that I could use inside of Lightroom to be able to do that. So I'm going to use Luminar 4 to do that. And I have a nice lightning photo that I want to put in the background here. So I didn't bring up my shadows too much because the lightning photo was taken. There's a lot of clouds. So it's a lot darker. And I want to make sure that my foreground matches my sky as much as possible. It's a real key important tip to when you're doing your sky replacement. You want to make sure that the clouds or sky, whatever you're bringing in there, is going to match lighting wise with your foreground. So what I'm going to do here is go under File, Export with Preset, and let's go down to Luminar 4 all the way down here at the bottom. And I have a couple different options here. I have one where it's open source files. If I did that, it's going to send this original file with no adjustments that I made at all to Luminar. That's not what I want to do in this case because I already made some adjustments to this file. So what I want to do here is, let's get back there, Export with Preset, and click on Edit a Copy with Lightroom Adjustments. So it's going to make a copy of my file based on those preferences that I just specified, a 16-bit TIFF, and then it's going to send that into Luminar for me to edit. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, here we are inside of Luminar, and I want to replace that sky. So let's go ahead into my creative category and click on AI Sky Replacement. I'll open up the advanced settings and let's go ahead and select a sky. Now I'm going to go down to Load Custom Sky Image and I'm going to pull up one of my photos that has some lightning in it. Now this photo coincidentally belongs to my Ultimate Cloud and Sky Replacement kit that I have available at learn.mattsuess.com/clouds. It's a kit that contains 400 different sky replacement photos. Clouds, I have some lightning, I have some Milky Way, some night sky, and it also not only does include 400 images, but it also will include some free bonus training on how to use the sky replacement tool inside of Luminar 4 and make the most of it. So let's go ahead and load that custom sky image right now. And I'll scroll down here. That was, let's see here. Had that, this is it right here, and I'll click on Open. And we can see that it brought it in real nice. Looks like I need to adjust my horizon just a little bit. So let me adjust my horizon positioning. We can see here, I'm just going to drag that down just a little bit. And the horizon blending, I don't need to do any blending at all. This fit perfectly behind the mountains here. Don't need to use any of the closed gaps or sky local. You'll need to use those if you have a more complex type of a sky replacement here. But let's take a look at the sky temperature. I can lower that temperature a little bit, get rid of some of that red and yellow. And let's see here, if I darken that down just a little bit, I'll lower the exposure just a touch. Let's go into my Essentials category, and let's go under AI Enhance, give this a little bit of AI accent, and let's take a look at the Sky Enhancer. That's darkening it down just a little bit, and maybe just a little bit of structure. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Let me go ahead and click on Apply. This will now bring this back into Lightroom again. Okay, here we are inside of Lightroom, and we can see that here it is inside of my library automatically. You can see I have two versions. I was doing a practice version before I did this recording, so I have two different versions of this same image that I did using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Lightroom. Now, in terms of workflow, using Luminar 4 as a plugin inside of Lightroom, you have two different options here. One, you can go ahead and make all of your adjustments inside of Lightroom and then send that over to Luminar to do that finishing touches, kind of like what I did when I was in Photoshop by going with Export with Preset. Let me select one of those photos here. By going File, Export with Preset, and clicking on Edit a Copy with Lightroom Adjustments. Or you can use Luminar 4 as your raw processor. Send it over by open source files. It'll send over that raw file into Luminar. You can make all your adjustments. Then go ahead and when you click on apply, it'll bring it back into your Lightroom catalog as in my case, a TIFF file, because that's what I specified in my preferences. That's it. That's all the time I have for you guys today. I hope this was really beneficial in sort of getting you a workflow and some ideas on using this as a plugin inside of Photoshop and Lightroom. Thanks once again, Skylum, for having me on your launch day. Once again, I'm Matt Suess.
Excellent. And so, Matt, you're back. We're going to talk to you here in 1 second. Just give me a second. We had a couple of questions from some folks that I just wanted to tackle really quick. And those questions said things like, hey, I'm trying to run the installer. And it says, check your internet connection. You have a virus program installed or a firewall turned on. So when the application installer is trying to check out to the internet, it can't get through. So you need to temporarily turn off your firewall or your virus protection so the installer can download the files and the things that it needs. So just turn off your virus protection or your firewall, and then remember when you're done, turn them back on. You should be fine. Or if you head on over to the support page, they do have the ability to download a single installer that doesn't need to connect to the internet to pull that down. A couple of you are asking about where do I put the LUTs, the color styles. You don't need to put them anywhere. You just load them by choosing load and you navigate to the folder. So just put them someplace where it's going to be safe, and that's great. But I want to bring Matt back on now. And Matt, couple things here. So one, some folks were saying, hey, you know, I like Matt's stuff. Where can I learn more from him? I know that you've got a Facebook group, a YouTube page. Where can people check out more of your stuff?
Yeah, a lot of different areas. My main website is just mattsuess.com, and that's SUESS.com. My educational part is learn.mattsuess.com, and that's where I have that cloud pack at learn.mattsuess.com/clouds. On Facebook, you can just find me at Matt Suess. On Instagram, Matt Suess Photo. Usually, my call sign is either Matt Suess or Matt Suess Photo. And I also have a educational Facebook group it's called Learn Skylum's Luminar and Aurora, and you can do a search for that in the Facebook groups. And that's it's not a photo dumping ground; it's more of an educational group to really learn. You have to post before and after photos so that people can really see the before and after difference on what you can do inside of Luminar and Aurora, and where people can learn different tricks and techniques.
And I'll just say that I like the vibe of your group, Matt. You do an excellent job of keeping people civil and reminding them that they're there to help each other and to really learn from each other. So it's not a place to go and vent. Apparently, that's our support forum. So feel free to do that. But I do like the fact, Matt, that you have just such a great group of positive people that are there trying to help each other. When I get a moment to breathe, I stop in from time to time as well. But just great, nice people. Highly encourage you guys to check out that group. It's really nice. So that's good. So yeah, that's awesome. And you are correct, Brian. If Matt had a PhD, he could be called Dr. Seuss. I'm sure he's heard that joke before. But
First time.
Probably never gets too old.
That's a good one.
Yes, yes. So awesome. There was another question. How much longer are we going? About 3 hours. But if people are nice and still hanging out, we have some extra guests. We may be able to keep going a little bit more towards the end there. Just keep in mind that I've been talking for 9.5 hours, and I'm on bottle number 3 of Diet Coke. So we'll see when the crash hits, but it is what it is. So Matt, you know, you do a lot of landscape photography. What's some of your favorite equipment to get great landscape shots? What are some of the things that you find most useful?
Yeah, we could talk brands. I mean, everyone has their favorite brands. I've switched over to Olympus recently. Absolutely love it. It has some really great features that are just unique to the camera system. But even outside of that, just learning how to use whatever camera you have is specifically important, because, if you know the techniques and what you need to do out in the field when taking pictures, you can pretty much use any camera to get really good shots. If you're doing landscape photography in particular, having a tripod is extremely beneficial. It allows you to slow down a little bit. We're so used to just, I see people all the time, they're just walking around taking a picture, and not really studying the scene. So having a tripod there, your camera's then locked down on that position. It slows you down. You can look through the viewfinder, you take a picture, you look at your LCD screen, which is basically like looking at an instant Polaroid, and you can really fine tune your composition. And sometimes just moving your tripod over just a little bit, or raising it up or down just a little bit, uh, or zooming in and out just a little bit, can make a world of a difference. And you don't find that if you're just doing a whole lot of run and gun shooting. So, getting used to having a tripod is key, and also shooting in manual mode too. Learning how to do that is really going to help your photography as well. You don't always want to rely on the camera making your exposure adjustments for you.
Makes sense. And what are some of your absolute favorite places to photograph? I know you lead workshops from time to time, and there's so many beautiful places in the world, and sometimes we're a little hesitant to give away all of our favorites. But what are some places that people can go that are a little bit more off the beaten path or are worth the trip?
I mean, the Tetons is remarkable. Everyone goes up into this neck of the woods to go to Yellowstone, and the Tetons is getting a lot more popular. Let's not make it super popular though, because it is getting a lot more crowded. I mean, and all the national parks are getting crowded, and it's good. It's good to see support for the national parks, but really just getting out and going down dirt roads, if you have any, getting off the beaten path in your own neck of the woods. I live up here in Montana, and I'm trying to do a lot more exploring. Just taking a topo map and just going down and being like, okay, I want to go check out this area here, and then just looking for dirt roads and looking to explore. And if you go, during the key times, early morning or late evening, that's when you want to be out there photographing. But exploring during the middle of the day. And photography really should be more about the light that you're gathering in your image than really the subject. Because if you have great light, if you're photographing great light, you can literally take a picture of anything and it's going to look fantastic. So you don't have to really key in on the specific, oh, got to be at the Grand Canyon. Well, look for some other place, down your neck of the woods that's off the beaten path, that you can make that could be just as grand as a Grand Canyon photo.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. And you mentioned people could check out the Skypack on the learnmatsus.com. Anything else
Mhm.
that you want them to explore before we say goodbye?
No, just sign up for my group in Facebook, and send a shout out. Any questions? I'm there to help in that group, and if anyone has any questions, email me directly at matt@mattsus.com. I love helping other photographers with their photography, and I want to give you Richard, thanks for having me on board, and thank you Skylum for calling me out on this and doing a little video for you guys.